You've probably heard Sjogrens called just dry eyes and dry mouth. I want to gently tell you that's one of the most dangerous myths in autoimmune medicine, and it's the myth that keeps people from taking this seriously until it's already cost them years. Here's the part that should genuinely bother you. On average, it takes people close to a decade from their first symptoms to an actual diagnosis. Not because doctors don't care, and not because the tests don't exist. It's because the early signs look like a dozen boring, ordinary things. Tired eyes at the end of a long day. A dry mouth at night that you blame on the bedroom being too warm. A general sense of being worn out that everyone around you seems to have too. So people wait. They assume it's stress, or aging, or just life. And while they wait, the disease keeps quietly doing its work in the background, sometimes for years, before anyone puts a name to it. Before we continue, I built something specifically for this, not just for tracking, but for your next doctor's appointment. It is called the symptom map, and it walks you through exactly which symptoms to track and how to bring them into the room with you. Type the word map below and I'll send you the link directly. I've spent years working alongside patients living with autoimmune disease, and here's what I've noticed. The people who do best with Sjogrens are almost never the ones who got lucky. They're the ones who understood their own risk early. They knew what to watch for, they knew which symptoms were worth a phone call instead of a shrug, and because of that, they got answers in months instead of years. So today I'm going to walk you through 5 things. 5 real, specific, doable things that the current research points to as ways to lower your risk, catch this earlier if it's coming, or reduce how much it takes from you if it's already part of your life. Number 3 is the one almost nobody connects to Sjogrens, and it has nothing to do with your eyes or your mouth at all. It's about a piece of paper most people have never actually filled out honestly. And stick around for the bonus at the end. It's one quiet, 2-minute habit, a set of words really, that could shave years off how long it takes you to get answers if something ever does start to feel wrong. One thing before we get into it, because it matters for everything that follows. If you are someone who has watched a parent or a sibling struggle with an autoimmune disease, or if dryness and fatigue have been creeping into your life and nobody has given you a straight answer yet, then what I'm about to tell you is for you specifically. Keep listening, because the reframe I'm about to give you changes how every one of these 5 things will land. Now, before the 5 things, you need one honest reframe, because it changes how you'll hear everything that follows, and I'd rather tell you the truth than give you a headline that falls apart the moment you look closer. Unlike some conditions where lifestyle carries most of the story, Sjogrens is mostly written into you before you're even born. It runs heavily along genetic lines, and it overwhelmingly targets women, as much as 9 or 10 times more often than men. Researchers believe that imbalance is tied to how estrogen and other sex hormones interact with the immune system over the course of a woman's life, though the exact mechanism is still being worked out. So no, you cannot outwalk this, and you cannot outdiet your genes here. There is no version of this video where I tell you that a bowl of leafy greens every day will cut your risk in half. I want to be straight with you about that, because you deserve the truth, not a promise that sounds good on camera and falls apart under a microscope. But here is the hopeful part, and it is real. Genetics loads the gun, but research increasingly shows that environment and timing pull the trigger. Infections, chronic stress, and hormonal shifts appear to be the things that can tip an already primed immune system into actually developing the disease, or that make an existing case flare harder and faster than it otherwise would. Those pieces, the triggers and the timing, are the parts you can actually influence. So think of it less like preventing this disease outright, and think of it more like this. You are managing the conditions the disease needs in order to activate. You are lowering the number of sparks landing near dry tinder. Lower the triggers, catch the process sooner, protect your quality of life either way it goes. That is the real goal sitting underneath every one of these 5 things, and once you see it that way, none of this will feel like empty wellness advice. It will feel like actual risk management, because that is exactly what it is. Number 1. Take chronic stress seriously. And I mean actually seriously, not the way we usually wave off the word stress as background noise in a busy life. This one surprises people, but it is backed by real data. Several studies looking specifically at people before their Sjogren's diagnosis have found something striking. People who went through significant, prolonged stressful life events in the period before their symptoms started, things like a divorce, a death in the family, a period of intense caregiving, a job loss that dragged on, showed a meaningfully higher likelihood of developing the disease afterward compared to people who hadn't gone through something similar. Nobody fully understands the exact mechanism yet, and I want to be honest about that uncertainty rather than pretend the science is more settled than it is. But the leading theory researchers are working with goes like this. Chronic, unrelenting stress keeps your immune system in a heightened, dysregulated state for long enough that it starts to lose the ability to tell friend from foe. It starts misfiring against your own tissue, and in Sjogren specifically, that misfire often lands on your moisture-producing glands, the ones responsible for tears and saliva. Let me tell you about a patient I'll call Marianne, a composite of several people I've worked with over the years, because her story captures this pattern almost perfectly. Marianne was 52, a physical therapist, the kind of person who prided herself on never missing a day of work. Her husband was diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's, and for nearly 2 years she became his primary caregiver on top of a full-time job. She told me later that she didn't sleep more than 5 hours a night for most of that stretch. About 18 months into caring for him, she started noticing her eyes felt gritty by early afternoon. She assumed it was screen time. Then her mouth started feeling dry at night. She assumed it was the medication she'd started for her blood pressure. It wasn't until nearly 2 years after those first symptoms that she was finally diagnosed with Sjogrens. Was the caregiving stress the sole cause? Almost certainly not, because there was likely a genetic predisposition sitting quietly underneath the whole time. But did that unrelenting stress very likely accelerate the timeline? The research on stressful life events and autoimmune onset says it's a real possibility, and Marianne herself believes it played a role. This is not me telling you to simply relax and you'll be fine, because that kind of advice is both unhelpful and untrue. It is simpler than that, and more actionable too. If you are currently in a season of relentless stress, the kind that has gone on for months rather than days, that is not something to white-knuckle through indefinitely while telling yourself you'll rest once things calm down. It is worth actively building in recovery, even in small doses. Real sleep, protected and prioritized rather than sacrificed first. Saying no to one more obligation this month, even if it disappoints someone. Therapy or counseling if it is available and affordable to you. Even 10 minutes of genuine quiet a day, away from screens and obligations. Not as indulgent self-care. As a form of active immune protection, the same way you'd protect a wound from getting infected. Type the word reset below and I'll send you my free stress recovery checklist, the exact small habits to protect your immune system during a hard season. Number 2. Do not shrug off infections, especially the ones that linger longer than they should. Here is a connection most people have never heard, and it is one of the more fascinating threads in the current research. Certain infections appear to act as a spark for Sjogrens in people who are already genetically primed for it. Epstein-Barr virus, the same virus behind mono, has one of the stronger associations found in the research so far. There is also emerging interest in certain gut bacteria, including Helicobacter pylori, the bacterium best known for causing stomach ulcers, as another possible trigger in some patients. The leading theory here is called molecular mimicry, and once you understand it, you'll never think about a lingering infection the same way again. Here's how it works. A virus or bacteria invades your body, and it happens to look, at a molecular level, just similar enough to some of your own tissue. Your immune system does exactly what it's supposed to do. It builds an aggressive response and wipes out the invader. But in some people, that immune response doesn't fully stand down afterward. It keeps recognizing that lookalike tissue in your own body as a threat, and it keeps attacking it long after the actual infection is gone. Your own glands become collateral damage in a war that technically already ended months or years earlier. You cannot avoid every infection that comes your way, and I'm not going to pretend that's realistic advice. Colds happen. Stomach bugs happen. But you can stop treating "I've been sick for weeks and it just won't fully go away" as something to simply push through and forget about. A case of mono that leaves you exhausted for months longer than it should. A stomach issue that never quite resolves and gets written off as "just my stomach being sensitive now." A sinus infection that seems to linger indefinitely. These are worth an actual follow-up conversation with your doctor, not because every lingering infection leads to autoimmune disease, but because an infection that refuses to fully resolve is exactly the kind of signal that deserves a second look rather than a shrug. Type the word linger below and I'll send you my free guide on which won't go away symptoms are actually worth a doctor's visit. Number 3. Know your family tree. And I mean actually know it, not just the vague sense that someone on my mom's side had something. This is the one that surprises almost everyone, because it has nothing to do with what you eat, how you sleep, or how you feel today. It has everything to do with a conversation you may have never had with your own relatives. Research consistently shows that having a first-degree relative, meaning a parent, a sibling, or a child, with any autoimmune disease at all, not just Sjogren specifically, but also lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, autoimmune thyroid disease, type 1 diabetes, or several others, is one of the single strongest risk factors identified for Sjogren so far. Not a small statistical bump. One of the largest associations found across the research, larger in many studies than most of the environmental factors we just discussed. Let me give you a real-world version of why this matters so much. If your mother had lupus, or your sister was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, or your father has rheumatoid arthritis, that single fact matters more to your personal Sjogren's risk than almost anything else on this entire list. And here is the part that genuinely frustrates me as someone in medicine. Most people have simply never been told that. Family history gets asked about for heart disease, for cancer, for diabetes, but autoimmune disease as a category rarely gets the same thorough questioning during a routine physical, even though the research says maybe it should. I think of a patient I'll call Denise, again a composite drawn from a pattern I've seen many times. Denise's mother had lupus for as long as Denise could remember. Nobody ever connected that fact to Denise's own health until she was well into her 40s, when she mentioned her dry eyes almost as an afterthought during an appointment for something else entirely. It was only because I happened to ask about her family history directly that we ordered the antibody testing that eventually confirmed Sjogren's, years before it would have otherwise been caught if she'd waited for symptoms to become undeniable. This is why it earns its own number on this list, not because you can change your family history, obviously you can't, but because knowing it thoroughly changes what you should be watching for in yourself, and how quickly you should act when something feels off. If autoimmune disease runs anywhere in your immediate family, don't wait for years of unexplained symptoms to pile up before mentioning it. Bring it up with your doctor proactively, before anything feels wrong, and ask directly what early screening, usually a simple blood test for certain antibodies, might make sense given your family's history. Type the word tree below and I'll send you a free simple worksheet for mapping your family's autoimmune history before your next appointment. Number 4. Pay close attention around hormonal turning points in your life, especially perimenopause and menopause. Given how strongly Sjogren's is tied to the interaction between hormones and the immune system, it is not a coincidence that diagnosis rates climb noticeably around the years surrounding perimenopause and menopause. That significant drop in estrogen appears to be another one of those trigger windows the research keeps circling back to, similar in concept to the stress and infection triggers we already discussed, just operating through a different mechanism. I want to be careful here, because this doesn't mean menopause itself causes Sjogren's, and I don't want you walking away thinking every hot flash is a warning sign. What it means is that this stretch of life represents a genuinely higher alert window for your immune system more broadly, not just for Sjogren's but for autoimmune conditions in general. And within that window, dryness symptoms that get automatically waved away as just menopause deserve a second, more careful look, especially if the dryness feels more severe or more widespread than typical hormonal dryness, or if it arrives alongside joint pain, unusual fatigue, or swollen glands along your jawline or in front of your ears. If you are in or approaching this stage of life, this is the moment to actually name new or worsening dryness to your doctor specifically, using clear language, rather than folding it into a general conversation about getting older or into a broader menopause symptom checklist where it might get lost among a dozen other complaints. Say the words dry eyes and dry mouth clearly, mention how long they've been going on, and ask whether it's worth ruling out something beyond typical hormonal changes. Type the word window below and I'll send you a free guide to the exact phrases to use with your doctor during perimenopause and menopause. Number 5. Protect the glands you already have. Regardless of whether Sjogren's ends up being part of your story or not. This last one shifts the conversation slightly, from lowering your risk of developing the disease in the first place, to protecting the tissue you currently have, because this piece of advice holds value either way things go for you. Chronic dryness itself, whether it comes from simple dehydration, certain common medications like antihistamines or some blood pressure drugs, smoking, or just genuinely not paying attention to your body's signals, puts ongoing physical stress on your salivary and tear glands over time. And here's the part that matters most. Damaged, Chronically irritated glandular tissue appears to be more vulnerable once an autoimmune process actually gets underway, and dryness-related complications, things like accelerated dental decay or damage to the surface of the eye, tend to compound quickly once they begin, creating a snowball effect that's much harder to reverse than to simply prevent in the first place. The unglamorous basics genuinely matter here, more than people expect. Real, consistent hydration throughout the day, not just when you happen to feel thirsty. Actually treating chronic dry mouth or dry eye symptoms with appropriate over-the-counter products rather than simply tolerating them as a minor annoyance. Genuinely good dental care, including regular checkups, because a chronically dry mouth loses much of its natural, built-in defense against cavities and gum disease. And if you smoke, it's worth knowing plainly that smoking is linked to worse dryness symptoms and worse oral health outcomes generally, independent of any autoimmune risk entirely. This one won't make headlines, and it doesn't come with a dramatic statistic attached to it. But it's also one of the very few things on this entire list that sits fully in your hands, every single day, regardless of your genetics or your family history or anything else outside your control. Type the word protect below and I'll send you a free daily checklist for keeping your eyes, mouth, and teeth protected starting today. Now I want to draw a clear line here, because I would genuinely rather you trust me completely than feel hyped up by something that doesn't hold up under closer scrutiny. None of what I've told you today is a guarantee, and there is currently no equivalent of a single proven diet or lifestyle protocol clinically shown to prevent Sjogrens outright, the way we have for some other conditions in medicine. This remains an active, evolving area of research, with plenty of open questions still being worked out by scientists who study this condition. What I've given you today reflects what the current evidence actually points to, not a promise, but a set of odds you can genuinely nudge in your favor through the choices available to you. And there are certain signs that deserve an actual phone call to your doctor now, not a wait-and-see approach. Persistent dry eyes or dry mouth that is new or clearly getting worse over time. Unexplained fatigue paired with joint pain that doesn't have an obvious cause. Swollen glands under your jaw or in front of your ears that don't resolve. Or a strong family history of autoimmune disease combined with any of the symptoms I just mentioned. Any one of those, especially in combination, is worth bringing up directly and by name at your next appointment, rather than mentioning it briefly and letting it get lost in a longer conversation about something else. Bonus: learn the actual name of the blood test. Now I promised you a bonus, something almost nobody connects to this condition, and here it is. Learn the actual name of the blood test. It's called an ANA panel, often ordered alongside more specific antibody testing known as anti-SSA, sometimes labeled Rho, and anti-SSB, sometimes labeled Lane. Most people don't discover this testing even exists until years into unexplained symptoms, often after multiple doctors, several dead ends, and more than a little frustration along the way. If you have a family history of autoimmune disease, or if you've had symptoms lingering for months without a clear explanation, simply knowing the correct words to ask for by name can be the difference between getting an answer in a matter of weeks and spending the better part of a decade searching for one. That's the entire bonus. 2 minutes of remembering a few specific words, one direct conversation with your doctor, and potentially years saved in the process. Type the word test below and I'll send you a free printable card with the exact test names to hand your doctor. Recap. So here's the quick recap to carry with you from everything we've covered today. Number 1. Protect your recovery time during genuinely high-stress seasons of life rather than pushing through indefinitely. Number 2. Don't shrug off infections that linger far longer than they reasonably should. Number 3. Know your family's full autoimmune history and actually say it out loud to your doctor rather than assuming it doesn't matter. Number 4. Take dryness seriously around hormonal transitions instead of automatically writing it off as a normal part of aging. And number 5. Protect the glands you already have through basic, consistent hydration and genuine dental care. None of this rewrites your genetics, and I never want to pretend otherwise. But all of it, taken together, stacks the odds a little more in your favor, and gets you real answers faster if the day ever comes that you need them. And if this connected a dot for you that nobody ever fully explained before, that alone was worth the time we just spent together. Type the word map below one more time if you haven't already. It's the fastest way to start putting all 5 of these into practice.